Birth control puts you in a pseudo-menopausal state. What do I mean? It shuts off your own hormonal production totally. You are replacing it daily with these synthetic forms of estrogen and progesterone if you're using that type of pill. And you're doing it at extremely low levels. Why? One, because without the fluctuating and super surges of estrogen, you won't ovulate, which is part of the process of preventing pregnancy that hormonal contraception uses. And then the other reason is you won't build up enough of a lining in your uterus to create an opportunity for a successful implantation. So it's going on both sides of the cycle equation to prevent ovulation and conception by tamping down your hormone levels. And this is really something that I don't think a lot of women know about. I've spent years helping women understand their hormones, and one of the most powerful shifts I've seen is what happens when you start working with your cycle instead of against it. It's not just about fewer symptoms, it's about feeling more like yourself again, more steady, more energized, more at home in your body. We studied cycle syncing, and 92% of women had less PMS in just 60 days. If you're curious, you can try it for free. Just download the MyFlow app on iTunes or Google Play and use the code FREEMONTH. Welcome back to the Ovary Club. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. I'm really excited about today's episode because I hope by the end of it, you will understand why you want to have your period for as long as possible. I want to start today with a little bit of a question, maybe feels a little unexpected, but most of us have been taught to think that our period is a problem. But what if it isn't the problem? What if the real problem is the way we've been taught to think about it? For decades, we've been sold this narrative that your period is inconvenient, it's messy, it's painful, and honestly, it's just something you should try to, minimize as much as possible, or even suppress with medication. And all of that messaging has really normalized that this idea that it's a good thing to try to have less cycles throughout your life, like to suppress your period. But here's the truth. Your menstrual cycle provides you with health beneficial factors throughout the month and long term. It's not a nuisance. It's a monthly report card of your health on top of providing you with actual benefits. And it's like this built-in system of supporting your brain, your heart, your bones, your moods, your energy, and long-term, your health span and longevity. It's the opposite of a nuisance, and it's doing this for you every single month. When you understand what your cycle is doing for you, it completely changes the conversation. So today we're going to flip the script. We're going to break down these huge toxic myths about your period and why you want to be cycling for as long as possible, and the top things that you can start doing now to support and extend your natural cycle for as long as possible. And I'm happy to report I'm almost 49, still menstruating and ovulating every single month, and not currently on any HRT, though that may come in the future. Right now, I'm not on it. I'm seeing what I can do to extend my cycle as well. And this isn't about, fear or any of that. It's really just about understanding, as always in the Ovary Club, the power of your biology, how to work with it, and how to use it for your benefit. So let's dive in. Let's start with these myths and misconceptions. So let's dive into the first myth, which I would say is this concept of your period being optional, right? And this is largely due to some of the narrative and conversation around hormonal birth control. And just for the record, when you're taking birth control, when you're on the pill, you're not actually having a period. You're not ovulating. The bleed that you have is often just breakthrough bleeding. And most of the time it starts to resolve itself, meaning you stop having that breakthrough bleeding the longer you're on that medication. So when people say you don't need your period, that it's optional, what they're really saying is that you don't need to ovulate. And that is a completely different conversation. And that is one I take a lot of issue with, because every single ovulation is not about getting pregnant. It's about producing progesterone and regulating estrogen production and creating a hormonal environment that supports your entire body. It has cardio, neuro, and osteoprotective benefits every single ovulation. And every ovulation you have during your reproductive years while you still have a cycle puts money into your health bank account, if you will, for when you stop cycling postmenopausally, continuing to confer those brain, heart, and bone protective benefits long after your bleeding ends. So you want to be banking as many of those cycles and ovulations as you can during the 4 decades when you're menstruating for the second set of decades where you're not menstruating. Let's talk about another uh, myth, which is that periods are just about reproduction. Again, and some of these may sound redundant because for me, it's all connected, but your menstrual cycle is not a reproductive event only. It's an endocrine rhythm that impacts multiple systems of the body. In fact, that infradian rhythm that I have made now well known through my second book, In the Flow, and through the cycle syncing method, your cycle is influencing everything beyond just having a bleed. It's influencing your brain chemistry, your immune response, your insulin sensitivity, your stress response levels, your metabolism. Everything is affected by the fluctuating levels of these sex hormones across the menstrual cycle. So it's definitely not just about pregnancy or reproduction. And when your cycle is functioning optimally, these hormones work to confer so many health benefits. When your cycle is not functioning optimally, you have a ton of symptoms. It's a signal that your body is out of balance and something needs to be taken care of. So it's also providing us with biofeedback every month, I went on Dr. Oz back in the day when he had a TV show back in 2013, and I was the first person ever to go on television, and I used fruit juice, different colored fruit juices, to simulate the 4 typical colors of the menstrual bleed to help show women how to look at their period every month to see what their period was telling them about their hormones. So it's not just about reproduction. It's really kind of a big health biomarker. And we do want to use every aspect of the data throughout the month to help us make choices about our self-care. Myth number 3, you still have a period when you're on birth control. Now, I know I talked about this a little bit in myth number 1, but it's its own myth because people really think that when they're on birth control, that they're still menstruating. You are not. Birth control puts you in a pseudo-menopausal state. What do I mean? It shuts off your own hormonal production totally, and you are replacing it daily with these synthetic forms of estrogen and progesterone if you're using that type of pill. And you're doing it at extremely low levels. Why? Well, one, because without the fluctuating and super surges of estrogen, you won't ovulate, which is part of the process of preventing pregnancy that hormonal contraception uses. And then the other reason is you won't build up enough of a lining in your uterus to create an opportunity for a successful implantation. So it's going on both sides of the cycle equation to prevent ovulation and conception by tamping down your hormone levels. And this is really something that I don't think a lot of women know about. So that breakthrough bleed is just sort of your body's habit of expelling a little bit of that lining. But as your hormone levels really get to those low birth control pill levels and your body adjusts to that, you won't even see that anymore. So you're not ovulating, you're not menstruating, you're in this pseudomenopausal state. It has major implications on your mood,
on your creativity, on the relationships that you might choose, right? There's plenty of studies that talk about how being on birth control causes you to select a mate that is not actually optimally compatible for you from a reproductive capacity. A lot of women go off birth control and realize they don't like their partners anymore. It's really interesting. It also affects your metabolism. You may gain weight. A lot of women go on birth control and then also need to go on antidepressants to deal with the major impact that lower levels of both estrogen and progesterone have on their brain chemistry. So it's a big deal. And you have to know that you're not having a period when you're on the pill. So just be aware. And there's so much more. You're affecting your gut microbiome. And if you're using it to prevent pregnancy, that's one thing. And there are other ways that you can do that. If you're using it to quote unquote fix hormone problems like PCOS or fibroids or endometriosis, it's not actually addressing the root causes of those issues and can sometimes make it harder to recover naturally down the road when you get off of that medication when you're trying to get pregnant, for example. Okay, myth number 4 is this idea that like skipping your period is no big deal. It's harmless. It's a big deal. When you don't produce a bleed after ovulation, this could be for many reasons. This could be that you didn't produce enough estrogen in the cycle and you didn't build up enough of a lining. This could be that you're not making enough progesterone and perhaps you didn't ovulate even though you think that you did, but something is off. You're not having the natural rise and fall of estrogen and progesterone that creates the healthy ovulatory and menstrual pattern that we want to see every 28 days or so. Skipping your period is a flag. It's something to be taken very seriously. And just for the record, back in 2016, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists decreed that your cycle is now to be considered a 5th vital sign. You know, the other 4 they take in the emergency room, like your temperature and your blood pressure. Well, what happens if you have an elevated temperature? You get into action around that. If you have high blood pressure, you take that seriously. If you skip a period or you're having intense PMS symptoms, these are all huge red flags that are indicating that your cycle is not functioning properly and you need to take action. So skipping your period is not harmless. Something is going on and you want to get ahead of it before it compounds into a bigger problem that could have implications on your fertility or your rate of hormonal aging. The last myth: menopause can't come soon enough. I can't wait for my period to be over so that I don't have to suffer anymore, right? I've heard this time and time again. And I get it. You know, if you've had a lifetime of painful bleeding, heavy bleeding, intense PMS, feeling like a different person half of the month, menopause can certainly feel like a relief, right? Because now your hormones have downregulated. You're not producing a lot of these hormones that have been stimulating the uterus, but the hormones themselves are not the problem. It's how your body has been metabolizing these hormones. Like estrogen on its own is not a bad hormone. But if you don't eat enough fiber, if you don't eat enough of the plants that provide your liver with the micronutrients it needs to go through its phases of detoxification, then every month when you produce estrogen, you're not breaking it down and it can overstimulate the uterus and cause the development of things like fibroids or just even a thicker lining than normal, which would cause heavy bleeding, right? If you eat the wrong dietary fats, you can have more cramps than you need to. So the problem is nobody's taught us how to address these things. And so we have been taught instead that we are cursed to suffer monthly, and we believe it. We have bought into this nonsensical narrative that is not based on actual science. And so then we also believe the myth that menopause is the solution. But early menopause is associated with, increased cardiovascular risk, reduced bone density, and changes in cognitive health that can be really problematic. So getting there sooner isn't a good thing. In fact, delaying it is better. So that's one thing. And then on the other side of the equation is Whatever your diet and lifestyle has been that has contributed to your difficult menstruation experience is also going to contribute to a problematic postmenopausal experience as well, from a blood sugar perspective, um, inflammation perspective. So all of those things are going to be aging you more rapidly anyway. So the real answer is, let's not wait until menopause to get some relief from our cycle. Let's use the biofeedback our cycles are telling us every month and take action sooner to start getting into that right relationship with our self-care and our bodies to set us up for symptom relief today, but also good health span for tomorrow. Your cycling years are protective. So instead of rushing to the finish line, do everything in your power to slow down your perimenopausal transition and take care of your period every month. So now that we've covered the myths, I want to talk about the benefits of having your cycle every month and longer. So the first thing is that it really promotes hormonal longevity, and that in turn supports cellular longevity. What do I mean by that? Every time you ovulate, your body is producing hormones in a very specific concentration, and it has an intelligent rhythm. And all of these hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they support um, growth, repair, resilience at the cellular level. Progesterone, for example, comes in after ovulation. It brings balance, it calms inflammation, and it supports recovery as well. So, this is a really good thing. This monthly hormonal pattern does a lot more than just prepare your body for a potential pregnancy. It's actively supporting your mitochondrial health, and your energy production at the cellular level. So, the better your hormones are, the more energized you're going to feel throughout the month. And we know this, right? When you are having lots of PMS symptoms, which is a sign of hormonal imbalance, you're not making enough progesterone, for example, how do you feel? Do you feel at the top of your game? No, you're feeling sluggish, you're feeling foggy, you're feeling irritable, you're feeling low energy, low mood. All of this is something that it's not just a symptom. You're experiencing that at the cellular level. And when we talk about mitochondria, it's important to understand that your healthy hormones are directly influencing how the mitochondria respond to stress, and how they respond to oxidative stress, for example, and how efficiently that they age over time. So it's important to take care of our hormones. When ovulation stops prematurely or from chronic stress, under eating, for example, skipping meals, lots of fasting, you can start to suppress this ovulatory cycle. You can lose these beautiful pulses of estrogen, and that's going to start aging the ovary faster. So, extending your cycling years is not really just about extending your fertility season, but it's really about extending the years your body has access to this natural repair and recovery system that is a benefit from all of the hormones in your cycle. The second benefit to having your cycle for as long as possible is the benefits to our brain health, our mood stability, our cognitive function, our memory. Your hormones are deeply entwined with your brain chemistry. Estrogen enhances serotonin production, and dopamine activity, and that affects mood and motivation and emotional regulation. Progesterone has a calming and anti-anxiety effect alongside GABA production, and it helps you feel grounded and stable. So these hormones work together in our brain to really optimize our mood throughout the month. In fact, there is no phase of the cycle where you should feel like your mood is off when your hormones are functioning optimally. You feel good all throughout the month, and that is something that you should know is part of the design. You're not designed to feel moody. That's just a sign of hormonal imbalance. This rhythmic exposure to estrogen and progesterone also affects our natural extroversion and introversion. It helps us balance our energy. I speak a lot about this in the cycle syncing method, where, you want to say yes to doing things that are more outwardly focused in the first half of your cycle because of estrogen surging at that time. And you want to do things that are more inwardly focused and like getting things done in the second half when progesterone is helping you be focused and calm and you can sit down and do all those things, right? Work with your body to reduce stress. And this helps with our long-term, cognitive performance, right? Because less stress always allows our brain to function more optimally. When cycling is disrupted or cut short, when you enter menopause sooner, then many women notice that they have increased anxiety, increased depressive feelings, brain fog, irritability. The reduction in estrogen and progesterone is profound on the brain. And a lot of women in perimenopause um, really struggle with that more so than any of the other symptoms. And it's not random. This is the absence of these hormones. It's not random. That's really what happens in the absence of a system that was designed to support your brain and your nervous system. So keeping your cycle longer really is one of the most overlooked ways to support mental and emotional well-being. The third benefit to keeping your cycle for as long as possible is on our bone density and structural skeletal integrity, right? Estrogen plays a critical role in our bone health. Each cycle, estrogen helps regulate the balance between bone breakdown and bone building, right? So when estrogen is present in that healthy rhythm, your body can maintain stronger and more resilient bones. When estrogen is too low or is, decreases too soon across your lifespan, right? The rate of bone loss increases. And that's why postmenopausal women are at a greater risk for osteopenia and osteoporosis. But what's important to understand is that this bone loss doesn't suddenly begin at menopause, right? This is something that can start at any time. In fact, that girls in high school are at risk for osteopenia and bone loss issues if they are into some sort of extreme athletic training that causes them to skip periods for long periods of time. It's one of the big risks of not having enough estrogen exposure once your cycle has started. So it can happen at any age. It's not just something that is exclusive to menopause. So having your cycle is an essential part of protecting your bone health. And it's every ovulation when you get that super surge of estrogen. That's really the key unlock to bone density. So every additional year that you menstruate is another year of bone protection, right? Through that natural, beautiful, cyclical estrogenic pattern. And it's not just about avoiding fractures as you get older. This is really about maintaining strength and mobility and quality of life later on. So again, when you think about a choice like should you go on birth control to deal with hormone problems or to prevent pregnancy, one of the questions you should ask yourself is, what's the risk that I might have? What's the opportunity cost that might come from suppressing ovulation for decades in my postmenopausal years? I think those are questions we should start asking. What are the opportunity costs of suppressing our cycle? I don't think we're aware of just how profound that opportunity cost is. Okay, another benefit to having your cycle is metabolic and cardiovascular protection. Heart disease is the number one killer of women. But that is really more of a postmenopausal conversation because of the correlation between the decline of estrogen and its impact on the smaller blood vessels of our body. And that, in turn, how it affects our cardiovascular function. Estrogen is cardioprotective. And so the longer you have a period, the longer you're cycling, the more endogenous, meaning your own internal estrogen that you're producing, the better. Now, that doesn't mean that in our perimenopausal, late perimenopausal years and early postmenopausal years that bioidentical estrogen replacement doesn't have a place. I think it's an important tool. And but we shouldn't be falling off the hormonal cliff at the rate that we are in our 40s. We should be able to produce much more of our own endogenous hormones for longer. And the only reason why that isn't happening is because we are mismanaging so profoundly the dietary and lifestyle inputs in our teens, 20s, and 30s. And by the time we hit 40s, our poor little ovaries have just, run their course. And they're giving us a report card that, we haven't supported them in the way that we need. Now, on the metabolic side, estrogen actually works to enhance and improve insulin sensitivity, meaning your body is better at using glucose efficiently in the presence of estrogen as opposed to storing it as fat. This is why women in perimenopause feel like all of a sudden they've just gained a bunch of weight because estrogen has kind of downregulated and now they're not responding to glucose as well. So that's on the estrogen side with metabolism. Progesterone is an interesting hormone as well from the perspective of metabolism because it's responsible for increasing our metabolic rate in the luteal phase. In fact, I've talked extensively about how we need to expand our caloric intake to meet the demands of this luteal phase metabolic shift, right, where we have a faster metabolism. So all of this progesterone fluctuating throughout the cycle also really helps us to maintain an interesting way our metabolic flexibility as well, cycle over cycle. So when you're cycling regularly and for years, at a time, your body is getting a lot of really important feedback on improving metabolism, on protecting the heart. It's not just about your hormones. There's so many other health benefits that go along with our cycle. And the last benefit is that by having your period that is healthy with balanced hormones for longer, it just means less symptoms, right? So, for example, let's take estrogen. When it's in excess, right, you're producing too much because you're exposing yourself to too many endocrine disruptive chemicals or EDCs, or you're not eating enough plants and fruits and vegetables that help your body detoxify and metabolize that estrogen out of your system, you're now in a place where you have estrogen dominance, right? You have all these symptoms. You have mid-cycle pain, you have mid-cycle breakouts, you have breast tenderness at ovulation, or during the luteal phase, you have intense PMS because all PMS is a luteal phase situation where you have too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. So all of this suffering is really something that's unnecessary when your hormones are balanced, when you're taking care of them. And these balanced hormones mean less symptoms today. It also means a slower journey through perimenopause because when we have the correct ratio of progesterone to estrogen in the luteal phase in our 20s, let's fast forward to our 30s. That means easier conception. You need progesterone to hold on to an embryo in the first trimester while the placenta is forming. It's not fully formed until the start of the second trimester, and you need good progesterone production to be able to maintain that pregnancy in the first trimester. So you want to look at your PMS severity in your 20s to give you a sneak peek of how you might do from a fertility perspective in your 30s. And then you want to fast forward to your 40s. Your PMS in your 20s and 30s is going to let you know how quickly you might go through perimenopause, right? If you're not producing a lot of progesterone in your 20s and 30s to the degree that you have all this PMS, then you may be aging hormonally faster than you should be. So, less symptoms is something that you want to be striving for. It's a benefit of having a healthy, regular cycle that you take care of, and it pays dividends with no symptoms, fertility, slower perimenopause, and a healthier postmenopausal reality.
If you've ever wanted to ask me your own hormone questions, the Ovary Club Insiders is where you can do that. You'll get access to private podcast episodes where I answer real member questions with clear, science-backed guidance you can actually use. Join us at alisavitti.com/insiders.
So let's talk about the 5 things that I think really help us extend our cycling years, and I'm here from the front lines myself, doing all these things and having been doing all of these things for decades now. So I want to share what I think the best practices are. Some of these things are going to sound like things that you've heard me talk about in my first book, Woman Code, and in my second book, In the Flow. But of course, that makes sense because this is the foundation of the work that I've been doing since the age of 21 to restore and protect and maintain my cycle health when I didn't have one from the age of 12 to 22, and to be able to be pregnant at these geriatric ages, as they like to call them, so 37 and 44, and to be 49, essentially. I'll be, as of today's recording date, I will be 49 in 2 months, and I'm on the last day of my bleed right now. So, to be cycling and all of this without any HRT regularly, without any real symptoms, it's something that I want more women to know about how to do. How do you navigate this over your life? So, what are some of those core practices? First, blood sugar stability. Your endocrine system, even though it communicates in the language of hormones like estrogen and progesterone and thyroid hormone and insulin and cortisol, it has an order of operations. It has priorities. The main priority is not your libido. It is not your fertility, and it is definitely not your cycle. You do not need any of those three things to survive. What you do need, and what your endocrine system prioritizes, is adequate glucose transport to the brain, the heart, and the muscle tissue. If you do anything to disrupt that conversation, your body, your endocrine system will throttle down production of your sex hormones to ensure that it has what it needs to make sure that you stay alive, right? You got to keep the lights on, so to speak, right? So you've got to prioritize blood sugar stability. It is a table stakes, non-negotiable practice that I have been doing. And I was forced to do it. I get it. I didn't love having to do it in my 20s, because I was like, why can't I be like everybody else? But because of my PCOS, I was forced to really get seriously committed to keeping my blood sugar stable, and the dividends are enormous. So what do you do to keep your blood sugar stable so that you can protect your ovulation, protect against PMS and progesterone imbalance, right? You want to eat balanced meals throughout the day. What does that mean exactly? That means a nice combination of macronutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, with a huge emphasis on the fiber, the blood sugar stabilizing fiber that comes from plants. I weigh my food now because I really find it fun to play the game of how many vegetables can I fit into my body a day. So I like to actually measure that. So just today at lunch, I measured 300 grams of plants. I had bell peppers, I had mushrooms, I had leafy green mix, and I had broccoli. Tonight, I'll probably have another 300 or 400. I'm probably going to have a couple as a snack, like 100 as a snack. So I love to get anywhere between 600 and 800 grams of plants in a day. All of that fiber is so blood sugar stabilizing. It really crowds out the need for the energy that you get from, let's say, a sugary kind of starchy carbohydrate. But at the same time, I don't shy away from carbohydrates. I have oatmeal for breakfast. I have grains for lunch. I have root vegetables in the afternoon. I have fruit. I eat plenty of carbohydrates, especially because I lift, I get my steps in, I run a company, I have 2 little kids I run around after. I want to make sure that I'm giving my body adequate fuel. It's not about extremes when it comes to the female body. It's really about the middle path, finding that nice blood sugar balance by eating properly throughout the day. Don't be afraid to eat regularly. And that's the other thing I'll say. Don't skip a meal. I have never done any intermittent fasting. I do not recommend it for women in their cycling years. It's too dysregulating to our insulin levels and our progesterone levels, our ovulation. I wouldn't do it. I only do the kind of fasting that is safe, which is the golden fast. That is 12 hours between dinner and breakfast. I also start my day with a super dialed in breakfast meal, right? I eat within an hour of being awake, and I have 30 grams of protein, about 30 grams of carbohydrate, and 12 to 14 grams of fat. That is my perfect start to the day. Keeps my blood sugar nice and stable throughout the day. And the way you start your day with breakfast will dictate how the rest of your blood sugar will go for the rest of the day. So you're either going to be on a roller coaster if you get breakfast wrong, or you're going to be nice in the pocket the rest of the day if you get it right. And then the other thing that I've done over the years, again, because I was forced to with my PCOS, but I'm really glad that I have been doing that for the past 20 something years now, 25, 28, is that I've pretty much eliminated my exposure to ultra processed carbohydrates, right? I don't eat things out of boxes. There are a couple of boxes that I do think are great, that have like vegetable based, chips and things, but it's very rare that I'll eat anything like that. And if you're curious what brand that was, I actually love Simple Mills makes a parsnip cracker that I just think is brilliant. So it's a root vegetable based cracker. I think there's some almonds in it. It's very healthy. So it'll be something like that on occasion. But mostly my carbohydrates are coming from vegetables, grains, beans, and fruit, whole foods, right? And the goal is, if you keep your blood sugar stable, you're sending powerful signals to the ovary that it is low stress, that it's safe to ovulate, that there's adequate resources to make progesterone, to have a healthy cycle. It really sets you up for regular ovulation, regular menstruation, and that is absolutely in your control. So definitely, definitely think about your blood sugar stability. And if you need support with that, using a CGM for a menstrual cycle or two is a great way to get acquainted with how much carbohydrate can you tolerate at each meal. A lot of us overdo it. Even health food, like I go to a health food restaurant and I ask for like a bowl, a grain bowl with veggies and whatever. There's enough rice in that grain bowl to feed my lunch portion for 5 days. Okay? We're being overexposed to carbohydrates. Too much is no good, too little is no good. You got to find what works for your body. So CGM can be really helpful. Okay. Number 2 in the flow protocol is looking at the next master regulating hormone. So we talked about insulin. Now we're going to talk about cortisol. You've got to reduce your stress load. The ovary is listening to stress signals in your body. If you are overproducing cortisol and not managing that, that is going to cause your body to downregulate the production of progesterone, because it can only do so many things at once. And if you are under a lot of perceived stress, then your body is going to try to help you with that. With all the adrenaline that you're producing, it's going to ask you to produce more cortisol to counteract that. And then also, so there's some of those things that you can't control, like life stresses, but there's a lot of stress that you're creating in your system, like skipping meals, skipping breakfast, not having enough food in your system, going too long between lunch and dinner, drinking alcohol, like all the overtraining, taking these long boot camp classes or spinning classes that last 75 minutes in the wrong phase of your cycle, not getting enough sleep, always being on, no downtime, no rest. All of these things are toxic forms of stress that your ovary is experiencing as a signal that it should throttle down your sex hormone production. So you will first see that in the luteal phase. You'll see less progesterone. You'll see more PMS. And then you're going to start to see cycle irregularities around ovulation. You may not notice it, but if you are trying to conceive, you will notice it. And then you'll further down the road, when you're exposed to chronic stress due to dietary and lifestyle mismanagement, you'll see it as earlier onset perimenopause, right? So instead of just like having regular cycles in your 40s, right? You'll have lots of skipped cycles at the age of 43 or 42, or just complete ovarian shutdown at 42 or 44. That is a sign that chronic stress has caught up to you. And here's the frustrating thing, and I get it, because I'm a type A person as well, right? We are mentally able to handle a lot of this stress, but our bodies are not as adaptive as our minds are. And that's the thing you have to make right? Like, yes, You can intellectually go all day without eating, but your body does not like that. And especially your ovaries, especially your cycle, especially your hormones, it's not great for us as women. So your hormones thrive in an environment where your body feels safe and is properly nourished. Period. Pun intended. Okay. This kind of leads me into the third piece, which is really about making sure you're getting enough exposure to micronutrients, right? And the types of foods. So we talked about blood sugar stability, but I want to kind of come at it from a different angle, which is your body needs specific things like amino acids to manufacture hormones, right? So if you are, for example, not eating enough protein, whether it's animal based or vegan, right? You can underdo it in either scenario. You might see that show up in a period that is, let's say, pale pink or not very long, like only 2 or 3 days, right? Your cycle should last 4 days minimum in terms of the bleed. Anything shorter is indicative of insufficient estrogen production. And we talked earlier about why that's a problem. But under eating, especially over long periods of time, is your body's going to downregulate reproductive function to conserve energy. So this is one of the most common reasons women have cycle irregularity or lose ovulation, just not eating enough or frequently enough throughout the day. This whole idea of skipping meals is just, you got to put that one to bed. It's no good for us. So supporting hormone production, it's, eating enough protein, eating enough fats. Protein hormones are made from amino acids, but they're stabilized in lipid rings. Think of them like little floaty tubes on a beach, right? You want to have enough healthy fats in your diet to keep your hormones stable. And you want to make sure that you are getting exposure to enough micronutrients. For example, you need certain vitamins like B vitamins, vitamin A to help your body manufacture proper levels of hormones, right? Every gland in the endocrine system stores specific micronutrients in its tissue to help manufacture those hormones. For example, we know that the thyroid stores iodine in its tissues to make thyroid hormone. So you need exposure to all of these things. So eating a healthy, robust, varied diet is essential. So cutting out food groups, not good. Skipping meals, not good. Another thing that's a real critical need is vitamin D3 exposure. 93% of all idiopathic infertility, meaning infertility that does not have a known cause, like you go get your labs, everything looks normal, but you can't get pregnant. 93% of that has a vitamin D3 deficiency in common. So you need to take certain supplements, and multivitamins don't typically cut it for women. This is why I formulated the balanced supplements, because in my practice with women over the years, and in my research, just seeing how much of certain micronutrients we need, I needed to formulate something that had big clinical doses of specific micronutrients to help us and help our endocrine system function. So make sure you're eating well, make sure you're taking supplements. You need B vitamins, you need vitamin D3, you need omega-3 fatty acids to support your hormonal production and synthesis. Make sure you're getting those things. You need magnesium. All of these things are table stakes. You got to do them. You got to take them. And your body needs to know fundamentally that it has all of those resources at its disposal to produce a healthy cycle. Tactic number 4 to prolonging your period for as long as possible: protect your circadian rhythm. I know, your circadian rhythm and your infradian rhythm are inextricably linked. So signals from your circadian clock around light exposure, right? Daytime light and night darkness help signal the pituitary gland to make melatonin. And this also supports ovulation and the whole cycle. So you need to make sure that you're protecting your circadian clock just as much as you're going to need to protect your infradian rhythm. What does that look like? So I think of it as wake hygiene and sleep hygiene. I know sleep hygiene gets a lot of talk, and it's important. Block that blue light at night for sure. Stop doom scrolling on your phone after 8 o'clock. Make sure you get yourself in total darkness so you can make melatonin. Melatonin is the first hormone to downregulate after 35. It starts the process. As you make less melatonin, your body starts to make more follicular stimulating hormone. And over time, the delta of that creates the scenario in which you stop ovulating eventually. So we want to protect our melatonin production, and you can. You can do that with a better nighttime routine, better sleep hygiene. Try to get consistently to bed around 10 o'clock, lights out, all of that. But you also need a good wake hygiene routine, right? It's not just morning sunlight exposure. Before you even get to the morning sunlight exposure, you got to make sure you're waking up in a low stress way. Do not look at your phone, right? That's just a perfect way to just jolt your body. With exposure to the light from your phone is the equivalent of noonday sun. That's going to jack up your cortisol immediately, just doing that. So don't look at your phone. Don't look at any screens. Go to the bathroom. Don't even turn on the overhead light. There's enough sunlight probably coming through your window. Just leave it. Try to keep it gentle, right? And then get yourself some morning sunlight. If you live in a place that's dark part of the year like I do, get a little happy light or some sort of photobiomodulation tool where you can expose yourself to simulated morning sun to help give your body those signals. Very important. When your circadian rhythm is aligned, it really helps promote healthy production of sex hormones throughout the cycle. Very, very important. Okay. The last tactic to prolonging your cycle for as long as possible, keeping your period well into your 40s and early 50s. I hope I can menstruate until I'm like 54, 55. I would love that. Is to protect your infradian rhythm with cycle syncing, right? Obviously, you cannot support your cycle if you are not paying attention to it. So track your symptoms, download the MyFlow app. The MyFlow app is the only official cycle syncing app. I built it for you back in 2017. It has the same circle icon on it that my book In the Flow has. So make sure you download the correct one. And you want to really track, are you having any symptoms at any time of the cycle? Ovulation, luteal phase. You want to keep an ongoing every month of your life while you're menstruating. Check in with that monthly scorecard. How is your cycle talking to you this month? Are you doing well? Is your cycle getting better? Are you getting less symptomatic over time? Or are you getting more symptomatic over time? If it's the latter, you got to get into action. And the best way to support your cycle health, and now we have a clinical study to show that this is in fact proven, is to be engaging the cycle syncing method. Just as a high level, the study showed that for 92% of study participants, they were able to reduce 86% of their PMS symptoms in 90 days, right? So you absolutely can have a better period month over month. That is why you should be tracking your cycle. Don't just track your cycle to know when you're going to bleed. Track your cycle because it's a biomarker of your health, and understand what those symptoms are telling you, which the MyFlow app will do. And it'll give you a cycle health score every month, by the way, so you don't have to figure it out on your own. It's not about obsessing. This is about awareness, right? Just like you would want to keep on top of other biomarkers, or your temperature if you had a cold, or your blood pressure if you had a concern. You want to stay on top of your cycle health because it is a fifth vital sign, and it is so critical to your health span. And then, of course, engaging the cycle syncing method. Align your nutrition, your workouts with your cycle phases, align your productivity and your focus with your cycle phases so that you can reduce stress and support those estrogen and progesterone levels optimally throughout the cycle. The more you work with your cycle, the longer you will be able to have a cycle, right? I think the idea is that if you can really start to get in the flow of those hormones, the longer your ovary and your cycle will perform for you. All right, so let's recap. We talked about a lot of things today. First and foremost, we really flipped the script on this whole narrative that you've been taught, which is like to dread your period and that like you should hope to get rid of it as soon as possible. We started by breaking down these huge myths and misconceptions about your cycle, like the idea that your period is optional or that it only matters for reproduction or that menopause is like a relief. I hope that you can now see that those things are not true and that they have ties to your longevity and your health span. Then we talked about why you want to be cycling for as long as possible, because your menstrual cycle supports your brain health, your bone health, your cardiovascular health, protects your mitochondrial health, slows down your rate of hormonal aging. All of these things are really, really protective, and your cycle is the cornerstone of that. And finally, we got into what you can do about it, the practical, tactical, everyday tools that I've been using for decades to not only keep my cycle happening every month, but also to keep me from having symptoms unnecessarily month over month and to be slowing down my rate of hormonal aging really successfully. And I want you to start practicing this no matter where you are in your reproductive journey, your cycle journey, whether you're in the middle of it, you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, it doesn't matter where you are, get started because it doesn't require perfection. It just requires these small daily habits done consistently month over month to get these benefits. If this episode gave you a totally different perspective on why you should have your period, I hope you'll share it with a friend or a sister or a colleague. I know we've all been told this silly story about how we should ignore our cycle or hope for it to be over or skip it or all of those things. And I think we all owe it to each other to spread the word about what is really going on. The more we start having these conversations, the sooner we can put an end to all of this unnecessary hormonal suffering that women are dealing with quietly behind the scenes, day over day, month over month, decade over decade. It's just not right. And we can do something to interrupt this pattern. If you're not already, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're going to be continuing to build on this conversation episode over episode, and I don't want you to miss any critical information. I want you to understand how your body works and how you can actually support it every single day so that you can feel the way you're designed to feel, which is fantastic. And as always, if you love this episode, it would mean so much to me if you left a quick review. It helps me understand what you're interested in learning about, but it also helps other women find their way to our show. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next episode.